Alrighty, welcome to our first reaction video. I thought I could just, have a camera and then that would be the only way for me to, take some reaction. But no, guess what? There's a goated app called X Recorder. Yeah, I'm recording it right now. So, I really love this app. This app is perfect for mobile users, for Android users. Wow, man. It has pushed the boundaries. I never thought I could react, like this. So the guy that I'm gonna react to is What Lurks Beneath. And holy shit, man, I fucking love this man. He is spectacular. His storytelling, his commentary, it's just top notch, on point. And his editing, mesmerizing, man. Like fucking on point. Super, super. Like it's just so fitting, and it creates an atmosphere. This guy is absolutely amazing. Go and subscribe to him. Not just because I want to be gentle or generous. No, I really think this guy is worth a shot. He deserves millions of subscribers. He has already millions, but more. So yeah, I'm type of guy to I'm a type of man who loves cryptids, who loves mysteries. And obviously my dream is come to the United States of America, build myself a life, the life that I have always dreamed about. But I can't do that right now. I'm planning that for the future. I'm taking huge steps to accomplish that. But that is a story for another time. So I'm gonna watch this video, and this video is about Bigfoot. Yes, Bigfoot is real. Dogman is real. I know those two for sure. Others I don't know. The Mothman, the Lizard Man. I don't. There are not so many eyewitnesses about those creatures. There are not so many eyewitnesses that have come forward and shared their testimonies. So I don't know about those ones, but Dogman, Bigfoot, absolutely legit, real creatures. You want to believe it or not, you want to make fun of it, yeah, it's all fun and games until you see it for yourself. So if you're in America, you better not piss them off, man. I'm telling you. Okay, let's watch this. I'm excited. So, 3 terrifying Bigfoot encounters. Hell yeah, let's go. Let's see.
Deep within America's forests,
They're all in
something
America.
ancient and predatory watches us. 3 separate witnesses ventured into the wilderness believing they were alone, but they discovered the terrifying truth. They each encountered a bipedal creature that most believe doesn't exist. Their testimonies
about to
have
find
been
out. They're about to find
systematically
out.
dismissed, ridiculed by scientists, and buried by mainstream media. What you're about to hear has been deliberately hidden from the public because the truth about what stalks our woods would shatter everything we think we know about the natural world. These are 3 true, terrifying eyewitness accounts from those who've seen the impossible. You won't want to miss this one. On the evening of February 1st, 2024, a hunter named MK had arrived at the Spring Creek Canyon Trail, located in a remote section of state game lands within Center County,
Look at those
Pennsylvania.
beautiful mountains.
It was already very dark since the sun had set at around 5:30, and being a student at Penn State University, MK was always thankful to be out on trips like this where he could hunt raccoons in peace without having to worry about real-life problems in school. He set up his Predator Hunter Fox Pro Patriot with raccoon sounds to attract them. And the area was nearly pitch black, with the creek running through a semi-canyon that blocked most of the ambient light. While he was playing these raccoon calls, MK started hearing some unusual sounds near the creek. It was kind of like this plap, plap, plap noise that was happening about every 30 or so seconds. It didn't sound like normal water. It seemed like it was being caused by something large. And after playing the calls for about 4 minutes, MK decided to leave because he was feeling increasingly uncomfortable. While walking back toward his vehicle, he stopped to shine his spotlight toward the creek, and he caught a glimpse of what looked like a black silhouette on the opposite bank before it disappeared into the brush. At the time, He dismissed it as his imagination or that maybe he was simply overreacting. And shortly after leaving, he pulled over at the fish hatchery entrance and stepped out of his truck to retrieve his phone from his vest pocket. Suddenly, a small stone came out of nowhere from the darkness, and the rock hit the ground right near his feet and kind of skittered right under his truck. MK immediately dove back into the front seat of his truck
Damn.
and quickly drove away. And that was the first moment he realized that something might have been stalking him, though he wasn't sure what. Now, even after those experiences, MK eventually dismissed them and returned to the game lands on February 19th, nearly
Jeez, man.
3 weeks later. This time, he went to a different section altogether.
Oh, fuck. Ads. Hold on.
The southwestern side that you access via Rock Road, and he parked at a roadside pull off around 5:20. It was in the mid to low 20s Fahrenheit, overcast, no wind, and he crossed the foot deep Spring Creek wearing chest high fishing waders. He entered the thick forest and began broadcasting predator calls. He didn't observe any animal activity, so he decided to head back toward the creek.
He didn't
Along
expect
the
the
way,
answer.
he discovered a small animal trail that roughly paralleled the waterway. And by 6:10, almost all the daylight was gone since the sun had set at roughly 5:51. The forest canopy blocked what little ambient light remained. Once he reached a location with a small bridge and exposed rock face, the ground cover was very sparse. But the pine canopy above was extraordinarily dense. He was standing beside this rock face when he turned west to head back along the creek, and the darkness was really starting to make him feel anxious. After passing the rock face, he heard a single solid wood knock at what would be his 8 o'clock position, and he described the sound as a bat giving a tree a nice firm tap. Despite feeling nervous, he just continued walking, trying his best to stay calm. He had encountered bears before and he knew that running would simply trigger a predator response, so he kept his cool. And he pulled out his spotlight and began scanning the forest around him, and then he heard something slowly and surely paralleling his path. He could hear ice and twigs crunching beneath what sounded like deliberate footsteps, and the sound was coming from the direction of the wood knocking. And he kept turning to look behind him with the spotlight, and at one point, he caught a brief glimpse of
Is that a
something
real? Oh,
large and
holy
upright
shit.
that would disappear
Is that
behind a
real
tree.
footage?
And so, quickly
I guess
thinking,
not.
he pulls out his phone, calls his friend, and he's like, "Get your AR and get your butt out here now. This is nuts." And his voice the entire time was just cracking with fear. And of course, his friend initially
I will
laughed,
never
but
go into the woods
then
without
realized
being
how
armed.
serious
Never.
MK sounded. At this point in the situation, MK was basically trapped at a creek choke point with thorn bushes all around, because going forward would force him deeper into the forest, and turning back meant facing whatever animal was following him. So he was standing with his back to these thorns, facing south into the darkness, with his shotgun in one hand and his spotlight in the other, his phone on speaker in his vest. While scanning the forest with his spotlight, the light caught something. It was standing just 40 yards away,
Why?
partially concealed
Bro, don't
behind
tell
a
me this is
pine
a real
tree.
footage. Actually,
And
tell
MK
me
would
because I
later
want to know.
compare its face to King Kong, but with a sharper nose and less flared nostrils. The medium gray skin had this
Jeez.
wispy, lighter gray hair around the face,
Bro,
and
can you imagine
even the
seeing that
head
up
wasn't
close?
cone-shaped, but sloped and rounded like a human's, with this tuft of hair on top and what even looked like a hint of a receding hairline. There was little to no eye shine despite direct spotlight on its face, and the jaw was not sharp like a human's, but it was more rounded with a kind of blocky chin. And this thing was also massive in its arms and shoulders. It looked absolutely jacked. And after those brief seconds of eye contact, this thing just retreated behind the tree, and MK was freaking out on the phone with his friend, and he forced himself backward through the thorny brush toward the creek, struggling through the entangling brambles to reach the waterway. He was relieved that he didn't get torn up too bad by the thorns, and he splashed his way across the shallow creek to the opposite bank, and then scrambled up the embankment to Rock Road and quickly retreated to his vehicle and got the heck out of Dodge. He realized at that moment that he was potentially dealing with some sort of alpha predator, and he fled the area and abandoned any hope of returning. But not long after this incident, not knowing where to turn, he reported this to a Bigfoot researcher named Benjamin. And Benjamin
I've
made
not
some
heard of him.
interesting observations about
Is this
MK
him?
during their discussion. The first being that MK came across as earnest and very credible, that he had no history of making false reports or seeking attention, and he'd been visiting these specific game lands since January. Secondly, the investigator who interviewed him was actually familiar with the location. He had lived in the area for 2 years and had explored the exact
Look how
spot where the
thick that
sighting had
forest is,
occurred.
man.
The environment was
Damn.
perfectly suited to conceal a large, undocumented species. It's part of the ridge and valley region of the Appalachians, specifically the northern
Ah, the
limestone
famous
valley ecoregion.
Appalachians. The infamous
Interestingly,
Appalachians, I might
the
say.
area had also been recently stocked with 400 pheasants that hunters mysteriously couldn't seem to locate. Benjamin believed that the local Bigfoot population migrated from the ridges to the lowlands in winter because the lowlands simply provided abundant food, water, and shelter. But to make matters even stranger is that this wasn't the first report from the area. Another sighting had occurred at nearby Bald Eagle State Park in 2020, just 10 minutes away from the current encounter location. The area is connected to vast northern wilderness,
Damn.
including Black Moshannon State Park and
That is
additional game lands. Is
green.
it possible that what MK encountered that night was something that's been hiding away in the wilderness of North America, or was it simply a fabrication? The case remains open as one of Pennsylvania's most detailed recent encounters. At
Gotta go and
approximately
investigate.
11:30 p.m. on October 20th, 2024, a 39-year-old Army combat engineer veteran named Lacey the Boy was sitting around a
Lacey
campfire
the
with his brother
boy.
Michael Eagleman, Michael's wife, and Lacey's girlfriend at a secluded picnic area on Montana's Rocky Boy Reservation. The
Montana.
spot was very familiar to all of them. It was basically just a clearing surrounded by forest, but the vegetation wasn't too thick, making it the perfect place to relax under the clear Montana night sky. Earlier that
Montana is a
evening,
beautiful
the
state.
four of them had decided to drive out to this informal picnic area on Sandy Creek Road.
That is just perfect. Another ad. Sorry. Come on. Not another ad. Load it up. Do it. Chop, chop, yes. No. Do it faster. Fucking hell.
When they had
Yes.
arrived,
Ah. Alright, I'm having some.
both Lacey and Michael had watched a lot of episodes of Finding Bigfoot, and they thought it might be fun to try some of the techniques they'd seen on the show. Now,
Not a good
Lacey had
idea.
never believed in Bigfoot. I mean, to him, all those videos online were obviously fake, or maybe they were just
Not all of
representations
them.
of some
Not
kind
all of
of
them.
Native American spirit thing.
Check
He definitely
NVTV.
wasn't the type
There
to
are
buy
some
into
legit
cryptid
footage.
stories or conspiracies. I mean, after all, he was a combat veteran and he had served in Afghanistan and spent many hours in the woods.
Not gonna
They
prepare you for
originally
this.
wanted to play some Bigfoot howl recordings from their phones, but they realized they didn't actually have any cell service out there in the remote wilderness. Instead, they decided to try wood knocks, which is when you hit a tree with a stick or branch to try to communicate with Bigfoot. Michael started testing different trees with a branch, trying to find one that would make a particularly loud, resonant knock. He finally found a good one and started making these loud knocking sounds. They were just having fun with it, not actually expecting anything to happen. But within about a minute of Michael making these knocks, something completely unexpected occurred. Up ahead on the hillside, they both noticed eye shine, two sets of bluish white eyes that almost seemed to glow in the darkness, roughly 25 feet away from where they were standing. Now, Lacey and Michael were curious but not really alarmed. I mean, they had seen plenty of wildlife before, so Lacey walked back to the truck to grab his really bright flashlight, while Michael, without Lacey realizing it, began filming with his phone. Lacey just thought his brother was
Damn,
using
that
the
was
phone
a
as another
quick
light source,
transition.
but the two men then walked toward where they had seen the eyes, sweeping their lights across the forest. At first, they found nothing there, and they were about to dismiss it as just some deer or other animal.
They are good at
But
hiding,
then
man. They are
they
so
heard the
good.
distinct footsteps and the snapping of branches further up the slope. Lacey then pointed his powerful flashlight beam in that direction, and standing there, partially hidden behind a tree but clearly visible in the flashlight beam, was what could only be described
That
as a Bigfoot.
Bigfoot.
Lacey froze in place,
That Bigfoot looked
unable
like a
to process
WWE
what he was
champion.
seeing,
Jeez.
and he best described it as a huge black gorilla, but that
Where
it
is the
also looked
four,
like a
man?
man.
Come on,
It
man.
was massive, 8 to 9 feet
There
tall,
should be four
black
here,
skin
okay?
and hair all over its body. But the strangest part was that the hair appeared combed and clean, like the thing took care of itself. And one detail that immediately struck Lacey was
Wait,
that,
what?
unlike all the stories
Hold on.
he'd its body, but the strangest part was that the hair appeared combed and clean, like the thing took care of itself.
I
And
thought he
one
was gonna
detail
say
that
that the
immediately
Bigfoot
struck
shaved.
Lacey was that, unlike all the stories he'd heard about Bigfoot's notorious stench, he couldn't smell anything at all coming from this thing. There was no odor whatsoever, which seemed odd given how close they were to it. And its physique was unlike anything he'd ever seen. You could clearly make out its six-pack abs, a huge chest, and its massive arms. I mean, this thing was in peak physical condition, like some kind of bodybuilder, but much, much larger. And as Lacey and Michael stood there, just frozen in disbelief, it actually put something in its mouth. Lacey thought maybe it was some kind of food, and then after, staring directly at the men for several long seconds, it simply turned and began walking away.
Really? Get out of here. Let me watch the fucking video, man. Come on. We'll be right back. Okay, let's go. Damn, I fucking hate this, man. What is this? Everything is falling apart. God damn it. I apologize. Jesus.
Several long seconds, it simply turned and began walking away. It wasn't running or even hurrying, it just calmly walked away like it wasn't concerned about them at all. This strangely peaceful moment was shattered by screams coming from the truck. Michael's wife had spotted the thing from her window and was panicking. Hearing her screams, Lacey and Michael immediately ran back to the vehicle to check on the women. Once they were all inside the truck, they just sat there staring in the direction where they'd seen this thing. Michael was continuing to film from the
Oh my goodness, man. What the fuck is going on?
rolled down, and that's when the situation got a whole lot worse. Lacey's brother's wife and him both saw something very large and brown quickly crawling toward them. She starts screaming hysterically, and Lacey just
Golly.
starts yelling, "Go, go, go!" Michael's wife frantically started the engine while Lacey was desperately trying to roll up his window. At the same
The
time,
thought of
he
it.
was pressing himself against his girlfriend, terrified that whatever was approaching might reach through the open window and grab him. They sped away as fast as they could, only stopping once they had reached what felt like a safe distance from the forest. There, everyone still shaking from the adrenaline, they tried to rationalize what had just happened, thinking, did we really just see that? Now, the video Michael had captured was their only evidence, and until they reviewed it together, Lacey hadn't even realized his brother had been recording the entire time. The group was hesitant to share it because they were worried about being ridiculed. And instead of directly releasing it, they opted to give it to a professional editor and let them brighten it up and, enhance it, because if they did it themselves, well, people would just assume they were faking it all for attention. And their story would eventually reach BFRO investigator Matthew Moneymaker, who personally interviewed each of them and confirmed that they were very credible Chippewa Cree tribal members and took their account very seriously. Now, something to note that makes this really interesting is the context of where this took place. It was in the Rocky Boy.
Yeah, 1 second. So here's one thing that people don't understand, and they just want to, forget it and leave it behind, and call it BS. How many people do you think are gonna lie? Out of the thousands that are sharing their experience, how many people do you think are just there to make money? What kind of money are you talking about? People are not in a stadium paying this guy to tell a story. No, they're just trying to live a better life after what they have just witnessed. Okay, that is, you know, that is stays with them. You know, for example, if you see a dog man, the most terrifying creature on the face of the earth, like nothing comes close to it. You are living a daily nightmare. Okay, so you have to talk with people in order to let that shit get out of your chest. All right, so that people talk about this because it's giving them trouble. And you, what is wrong with you? Stop being a class clown. Stop being fucking attention, you know, stop being a joker. And understand what people are going through. Understand what people are seeing. How many people do you think are gonna just stand there and lie about it? And for what? It would only make them stupid for people. So they have nothing to lie about, you know? I believe them. I believe them completely.
Reservation, which covers over 170 square miles of mostly untouched woods, including substantial mountain terrain. And most of this land sees virtually no human activity throughout the year. As Michael explained to Matthew, the mountains in this area are incredibly rich with resources like various kinds of berries, not to mention it supports a healthy population of bears, deer, elk, moose. This is not an area that gets overhunted and remains full of wildlife. Now, even
Beautiful.
stranger is
And I
that
have
there
something
was
like
an
that.
incident back in the 1960s or 70s where a Bigfoot allegedly picked up a school bus and threw it down into a coulee, which is like a deep ravine. The event was
What?
significant enough to be reported in newspapers at the time,
That's
and
insane.
interestingly,
Do you know
Michael's
how
grandfather had
heavy is a
actually been
bus?
a child on that very bus when it happened. The video, though difficult to see clearly, was authenticated by multiple witnesses who saw the creature much more distinctly in person. And as for Lacey, he stands by the fact that even after going to war in Afghanistan, he had never been more frightened in his life than he had that night standing in front of that thing.
I wish they got a footage. Oh my god, stop, man.
Nature made magnesium.
2024, a woman who worked in food service at a local prison was driving down a deserted mountain road in Buchanan County, Virginia. She was running late for her shift that morning, which wasn't normal for her because usually she was pretty punctual, but on this morning, she had fallen behind schedule. So she was driving a little faster than she normally would. And the road she was on was called Page Road, and it ran right near the main gate of these abandoned coal mines. This was a route she knew very well
Abandoned
because she drove it
mines.
4 or 5 days a week at this exact
I
same
wouldn't
early
dare to
hour.
go there.
Her job
Absolutely, I
required her to
would.
leave home before 2 to get to the prison kitchen on time to start preparing breakfast for the inmates. But before working at the prison, she had actually been an Army supply specialist, so she was very disciplined and very observant. She'd been raised in the area and was very familiar with the flora and fauna, bears, deer, all that, and even these feral cattle that
I was like, what the hell is that? Goddamn. Okay.
she'd been raised in the area and was very familiar with the flora and fauna, bears, deer, all that, and even these feral cattle that roamed around. And speaking of which, these cattle had actually been released years earlier after the family patriarch who owned them had died and nobody else really wanted to take care of the animals. So, as she's driving down Page Road on this night, which she also noted was unusually warm for November, she rounds a bend and her headlights illuminate something beside the road. And at her first glance, she assumes it's probably a bear or maybe one of those feral cattle because it wouldn't exactly be unusual. And so she starts to slow down and gets closer to avoid hitting this animal. And she starts to realize that there's many things about it that just that aren't right. That what she thought was a bear clearly isn't a bear, and it's definitely not a cow. And now at this point, she's roughly about 20 feet away from this thing, and she can see it clearly in her headlights. What she's looking at is this massive figure that's in a kneeling position. And it's clearly on two legs, and she could see its knee joints. and it's looking over its shoulder while holding a part of some brush with its hands, and it appears to be hunting two deer that are about 20 yards away from it. And as her headlights illuminate this scene, it notices her car and it looks directly toward her, then glances back at the brush where the deer are, and then locks eyes with her again. And it's all very deliberate. And then it moves very slyly toward the nearby creek and just disappears in the darkness.
How do
The
they do
whole
that?
entire event lasted maybe
I
10
never
seconds, but felt
could have,
way longer,
get
as
my
you can
hand on that.
imagine. And even though she wasn't exactly overcome with terror, she just had this feeling that she wasn't supposed to see that. Like she had witnessed something private that was happening in nature. And so she drove past the spot and she could actually see the two deer that this thing had been watching. And she also noticed something really interesting about how this thing had reacted to her presence because, unlike an animal that would typically flee in panic, it had very deliberately and calmly moved to conceal itself. Like it wasn't startled or frightened at all, it was hiding. Now, this behavior suggests to her that this probably wasn't the first time this thing had encountered humans or vehicles. But, like the other two experiences, it was enormous. I mean, she estimated about 4 feet across at the shoulders, and even though it had been crouched down, she could clearly see that it could stand well over 7 feet tall. It was very lean, toned, muscly, not emaciated at all. But remember, it had turned to look at her vehicle and her at least once. And so she got to see its face, and she described it as having a very humanoid face, a very heavy, pronounced brow ridge,
Primate,
that the
yeah.
face was very square and blocky with a wide, flat nose, and the eyes were spaced unnaturally far apart, at least the diameter of a $50 coin between them. And speaking of its eyes, they didn't have eye shine, which is also very strange. I mean, almost all nocturnal animals reflect light from their eyes when headlights hit them, but when she's looking at this thing
Do
initially,
primates have
she's
eye
first
shine? I
thinking,
don't know
okay,
about
this
that.
can't be a Bigfoot. This is probably a poacher wearing a ghillie suit, which is this camouflage outfit that
can't be a
hunters
Bigfoot.
sometimes wear, but she couldn't figure out why anyone would be out there at 2:15 in the morning dressed like that. It just didn't make any sense. And so when she got to work, she told her coworkers about what she had seen. But instead of laughing at her or thinking she was crazy, because remember, she didn't just outright say, like, oh, I saw Bigfoot. She just was like, yeah, I had this weird experience on my way to work, and I saw this, maybe a hunter in a ghillie suit. I don't know. And they began to ask questions about the location, and some of them made comments like, yeah, there's weird stuff out there in the woods, which suggested to her that this wasn't the first unusual sighting around here. Now, later on, this woman revealed that many people in the area actually do discuss Sasquatch or Bigfoot like creatures, but they
Yeah,
don't
be open
formally
about it.
report
Yeah?
it. In fact, her grandparents even used to call it the woolly booger and would use stories about it as a
If you see
warning to
Bigfoot
keep
or
children
Dogman,
inside at
talk about
night.
it.
Now, we've come to
Even
find
if they
out
don't
later
believe it,
on
talk
that
about
her
it.
own mother had even reported seeing a Sasquatch near their family home in Whitewood, Virginia. Now, not long after her experience, she eventually submitted it to the BFRO, or Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. And wouldn't you know it, Benjamin, the same investigator who had interviewed MK, also interviewed her for hours. And after talking with
Benjamin is
her,
living the life.
he determined that her account showed remarkable internal consistency, that these specific anatomical details she mentioned, like the knee joints, the brow structure, and the eye spacing, were things that would be unlikely for someone to make up if they were just fabricating a story. The environmental conditions that
Who
night,
would do that?
clear skies, good visibility, allowed for a reliable observation. And the woman's background in military and her familiarity with this route enhanced her credibility altogether. And then we think about her actual reaction, that it suggests it was more of a genuine encounter rather than something imagined and amplified by panic. Despite all the information we have about the experience, the identity of the animal she witnessed that night will remain a mystery. And because you guys made it to the end, I want you to all comment below wood booger, so that way I know who made it to.
Let me just do that right now, buddy. You are phenomenal. Wood booger. Absolutely Hooking. There you go, man. Yeah, so we are, you know, we are at the end, and let me just tell you some of my thoughts about this. People don't see Bigfoot on a daily basis. People don't see dogmen on a daily basis. So, it's hard for them to believe you. But if you see it, talk about it. Talk about it, all right? It doesn't matter if they don't believe you. First of all, you will tell them that you have seen it. And in that case, they would understand that, okay, people are seeing this. Even if they think you're dumb, they know, they would at least say, yeah, that guy talked about this. And then if somebody else also talked about it and basically just let it out, then these people would finally realize that there's something in the woods. They won't just brush it off as a hoax or a made up story. Like, what made up story? Why would people just come forward when they know that you're gonna make fun of them? And okay, so here's one thing: most people who see Bigfoot and Dogman are, mostly traumatized by the experience. So you can see it on their faces. And there's this channel called Dogman Encounters. Most of you probably know what I'm talking about. And most people who go to that, who talk to the host of the channel, Vic Condiff, you can see them gagging, just not being in their best mood. People like startling and all that. It's very clear. It's very clear that they are revisiting a horrific scene. It's very visible, and it's very clear. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. This was amazing. Thank you, What Lurks Beneath. Thank you. I think his name was Josh. Yeah, thank you, Josh, if that's your name. It was epic, man. It was epic. Thank you.